The Newsround on Off the Ball.
With Gillette, for an effortless finish to your day. New Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
This is News Talk.
Now then, you're very welcome along to the show. So we are busy this evening. We've got Wednesday Night Rugby with Fiona Hayes and Liam Tolan talking about Ireland's defeat in the first of their 5 matches in New Zealand on this rather historic tour. So it was a comprehensive defeat as well. Game was over at half-time. So Liam Tolan and Fiona Hayes on the way. After 9 o'clock, we will be talking all things Kilkenny-Clare. Kind of an interesting rivalry. Basically never played in GAA history and then suddenly played 6 times in 9 years. So two of the protagonists involved, Eddie Brennan and James O'Connor, going to join us, and then obviously look ahead to the game on Saturday evening, the All-Ireland hurling semi-final. And Luke Jensen, always a very welcome guest, is going to talk to us all things Wimbledon. Some shock Nick Kyrgios controversy. I mean,
what?
I know.
Nick Kyrgios?
Yeah. Michael McCarthy, hello.
Hello, Joe.
And
Jumped in there.
Richie McCormick, jump in as well, hello.
How are you, Joe? You well?
Yeah, very well. So Kyrgios spitting in the direction of a fan. He turned and faced a fan who I think had been given abuse, so he spat in the direction. And then also not impressed with the quality of the not the umpire, but those around the court. The line judge.
Line judge, well done.
Line judge, excellent.
Now me and Joe haven't quite got into, we're more week 2 people.
More week 2, yeah. He's saying all these guys, they're like 90. What are they doing here? They can't see a thing. Which I think was a real refrain of McEnroe back in the day. He was they're too old to be doing this job. Why are they doing it? They're falling asleep. So that's been Kyrgios' start. And of course Serena Williams bowed out last night in a rather epic match as well.
Went out like a champion. Kyrgios, do you find Kyrgios one of those characters that always, in the cold light of day, comes across brilliantly? And you want him to be so much better, both as a tennis player and almost as a character, than he is, but just cannot avoid these kind of moments when he's in the heat of battle.
Yeah,
you know, it's not like he's just this kind of like arsehole, for want of a better word. He seems like a great guy.
He's not
90% of the time.
Yeah, you come away from his press conference and you think, wow, there's a lot there to like.
Yeah. There is. And to be honest with you, there's an amazing player in there somewhere. Like truly, probably in terms of like, do you know the way we talk about like street footballers as being these like naturally gifted people whose talents maybe don't transfer into the big bad world of professional football? There's an element of that with Kyrgios, maybe not street tennis, but that he's got all the natural little gifts and flicks and tricks up his sleeve. But if he was able to put them together into a coalescent match, then he'd be unstoppable. The problem is he concentrates too much on the mental aspect of things. And I even watched him yesterday because I was watching that match on BBC. I can't remember. It was one of the Todds, Woodbridge or Woodford, who's on commentary for BBC this year, and he was saying the thing about Kyrgios. Obviously, he's a fellow Aussie, and he was chastising him, basically saying the thing about Kyrgios, who in his own head wants to bring tennis into the modern era and wants to bring a more youthful audience towards it and wants it to be less stuffy and calls out things like old line judges and all that. Woodbridge pointed out, like, it's not as if he's the first person to do that. Like you mentioned McEnroe, like he was definitely one of them. Jimmy Connors was another, and there have been sundry others down through the years whose names have probably all forgotten at this stage, who all tried to be that bad boy, who all tried to be that guy who can maybe rustle up a bit of youth interest in things. And like Mick says, Kyrgios just comes off as an asshole during the course of these things because like he's given out to people who can't defend themselves. And I think the person who he spat towards, or allegedly spat towards yesterday, had just rather succinctly called Kyrgios an SH1T. And, I think that was pretty on the nose from whoever managed to do that.
He was certainly complaining about abuse from fans. And just to say, because you're listening, you're going, oh my God, Kyrgios spat at someone. It really wasn't like that. It was somebody way in the distance, and he just was doing like a side show. He was jogging towards the net at the end of a point or a game. And then he turned specifically to do like a side shuffle and I guess in the direction of someone who could have been 20, 30 metres away, just spat at his own feet. But it was almost like, this is what I think of you, I spit at the side. His exact quote, by the way, on the line judges is in The Guardian. So he's talking initially about someone just yelled out that I was SH1T in the crowd today. Is that normal? No. It's happening over and over again. I think it's a level of respect. Why do they feel it's acceptable? So this abuse from the crowd seemed to irritate him. Although he doesn't
But he was
seem
already
to
at
see the hypocrisy in then abusing everybody else around him. So what he said about the two line judges with silver hair, says the Guardian, who made rogue calls, these people are in their 90s. They can't see the ball, is what Kyrgios said. And then he also turned to one line judge who had made a point to the umpire about a certain point and called the line judge a snitch.
Oh, wow.
As in, don't grass on me. So I don't know.
What did they snitch on? Did they tell the umpire that the ball was out?
Something in that vicinity, I presume.
Their entire job.
Or maybe something he had said. But anyway, it was like Kyrgios, like, don't be a snitch. You know, we're the cool kids down here at the back. Come on.
90, like, I have to say though, if Wimbledon line judges are in fact 90, it's no wonder there's no ranking points available at this tournament. It's a disgrace.
Yeah. No Robinsons either. Did you see that?
I did.
pulling out.
I saw the great tweet. I think it was Sean Nolan who said that the split was believed to be cordial, which I thought probably won Twitter at least last week, if not all month.
Oh, did it do well?
Oh, it really did.
Hit the
Yeah,
jackpot.
one in terms of quality I was talking about, but yeah, in terms of numbers, Joe, hard numbers.
Okay,
did pretty well. Yeah.
The Newsround is brought to you with Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Richie McCormick clearing his voice. He's getting ready. He's got something big.
Getting ready.
Oh, he's got something big.
It's New Zealand rugby news, Joe.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, sometimes you do get an early sense of a tour in the depths of New Zealand winter, and given the result and the injury toll, starting to get a sense about what this tour could be. More Lines 05 than Line 17 at the moment. Anyway, Richie, take it away.
Yeah, Ireland's tour of New Zealand began on a bum note this morning in Hamilton. They conceded 4 tries in a 32 points to 17 defeat to the Maori All Blacks. Cian Healy had to go off injured, having himself replaced debutant Jeremy Loughman. There are also concerns over Jimmy O'Brien and James Hume ahead of Saturday's first test at Eden Park. Meanwhile, Farrell was asked about Loughman, who returned to the field despite taking an obvious knock to the head, which left him dizzy in the first minute. The Ireland head coach, though, says Loughman was indeed okay to come back on.
No, he actually passed his HIA by independent doctor. We brought him off as a precaution, so put Cian on, and then that happens to Cian, which is not nice really. So James Hume has a bit of a groin injury that needs assessing tomorrow.
Fiona Hayes, Liam Toland on the way after 8 o'clock to deal with, say, the Farrell clip for one, as opposed to the performance, which we'll do in a moment. The Loughman incident, I suspect, is going to bubble up and be a worthy and worthwhile talking point and bone of contention. So what happened here is Loughman, in the first couple of minutes of the game, he makes a carry, he's bent low at the waist. You know these carries where they carry head first and just like dive into the opposition, which always you think is just a recipe for something like this. So he is that carry where he's hinged at the waist and drives into his opponent, who knocks him back and really does knock him back. And even on it was actually kind of slightly disconcerting, even on the commentary after it was clear that Loughman had sustained a head injury. They're still saying what a great hit it was. And you think, that's okay. I think slightly behind us on the Northern Hemisphere on that front, but regardless, that's
without a doubt, by the way, but we can get into that over the next few weeks. Yeah.
So Loughman, to the eye, is very visibly frazzled, dizzy, has to be helped off the pitch, and I would say,
are we talking Brian O'Driscoll against France in 14 kind of visuals?
No, not as kind of wobbly, but like very, very ginger and like sitting down for a moment, and I'd say rocking a touch, and just it's a moment that increasingly we would say, well, now regardless of HIA or not, he's done, he's off, and so he was helped off the pitch, and I would still say very gingerly, like his hand out, kind of give me guidance here as I kind of come off the pitch. So. There's an independent doctor who did the HIA. It wasn't an Irish doctor, it's an independent doctor. He seems to have passed his HIA, and he comes back on and plays out the final, top of my head, 13 minutes of the first half, and then at halftime we don't see him again. And so this raises questions, because the rule is, and here is the contradiction in the rule, this is the contradiction that rugby has to answer for here, as much as I'm not so sure this is necessarily an Irish situation, because they were within their rights according to the rules to leave Loughman on, but where maybe they do have to answer a question is that the rule is any player showing clear signs of concussion, or here's the key phrase, or suspected concussion, must be removed from the field of play without returning. So the very simple question there is, did Loughman, in the eyes of most of us, and we're not trained doctors and we didn't speak to Loughman and we don't know him, but in the eyes of most of us, did he suffer a suspected concussion? I think the answer of 99.9% of people would be suspected concussion, can't say it was a definite concussion, but definitely suspected. Therefore, the rule is he should be removed from the field of play and he should not return. On the other hand, you've got this HIA thing.
Well, that's what I was going to say. You've got a doctor who is analysing him, and it's up to him whether that's like a suspected concussion or not in his eyes, not in ours. Now, I think that might be where there's a flaw in the rules, because if there's obviously a very specific test for concussion, and he could have passed all of those things for loads of different reasons. The brain is a very, very, very complicated thing, and all signs could pass afterwards. Whereas if you see a hit, it just doesn't look good in 2022, and especially as rugby, in my mind anyway, it's a while since we've had one of these. It feels to me like it's not unheard of, don't get me wrong, but it feels like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even at a push, we're seeing this every 2 weeks and we're having this conversation, and it seems to be gone. So for that to happen again, and maybe it is just a flaw in the rules, maybe he passed all of his tests and the doctor has no choice but just to say, do you know what, I can't say anything against this. This is, he seems fine to me, off you go. Whereas all logic and take that out of it and give the doctors a little bit of leeway, which they may have or not, I don't know, but you would suspect not, to say a hit like that, he shouldn't be playing rugby anymore. There are signs here that we might not be able to see yet.
Yes. We'll just have to, I think, speak to somebody in authority in World Rugby or elsewhere about what takes precedence here. The suspected concussion, therefore you're off and you don't come back on rule, or you've passed the HIA, so even though you've had a suspected concussion, you get to go back on. On the basis of today, it suggests the HIA passing.
So these are two separate things. So you go for a head injury assessment to see whether or not you have the concussion, but the suspected concussion could be a referee's call. You know, I don't know. It's very. It sounds like there's
maybe that's
room
the key
for
point.
interpretation.
We'll have to dig into who decides what a suspected concussion is. In the eyes of everybody watching, was it a suspected concussion? Yeah. So I don't know, Richie. You've probably kept an eye on some of the fallout. The Irish medical team generally, and I've no reason to say this other than just it's what I've seen. But I think over however many years you want to go back, have, from the top of my head, behaved impeccably on this front. One of the reasons I was surprised to see Loughman back on. But regardless of the specifics of the Loughman situation, that contradiction between HIA versus a suspicion of a concussion, therefore you must be removed from the field of play, that is a very glaring contradiction.
Yeah, it could be in terms of steps, because obviously the suspected concussion comes into play when we see him try to get up from that contact and he's held from the pitch, and it's quite clear, as you said there, you can look at him and say, I suspect you have a concussion, so therefore you have to be removed from the field of play. But once he's cleared by the HIA doctor, there's no impediment to him coming back on, and you have to and literally you just have to trust the trustworthiness essentially of everybody involved here, and presume that they are totally on the level, and that there's nothing to gain from sending Jeremy Loughman back on for, at tops he would have been taken off after an hour anyway, if he had been fully fit. So to send him back on for 40 minutes or so in a warm-up game for the first test, there's no benefit to trying to circumvent any rules if that is what was going on, and I don't think there was. And secondly, you would have to trust the opinion of an independent doctor who has assessed him and thought, yeah, you're okay to go back on. It can always happen that subsequent to him going back on, and he's actually in the cut and thrust of being in a game and running around, then his brain can react differently and decide that actually no, I haven't up to continuing on here, and that might have been what happened at half time when he was replaced by Cian Healy. But either way, the fact that we're even having this conversation doesn't do rugby any favours, because it just makes people question the safety of the sport in general, if at the very top level there are still grey areas and question marks that aren't and can't really be answered in a satisfactory manner.
In fairness to the Irish medical team and to Andy Farrell, half-time might have been the first time that they actually got to properly assess. If you're doing a HIA, you're probably pretty quickly in with the independent.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're I think that's probably, they made the call when they got the chance to spend some time with him anyway.
Yeah.
Like that's clear. So, I don't know obviously what went on for those 20 minutes in between, but
and I don't think any independent doctor or any doctor full stop with either team in the main, like there was a very poor incident in an Italy-England under-20s game in this year's Six Nations.
Wow.
But in the main, I think any independent doctor is as impeccable credentials if they're appointed to a match like this, and will carry out the HIA to the letter.
Yeah, I think the days of leave me on, Doc, I'm okay, are gone.
It calls into question the HIA once again, which people have been questioning for quite some time. Barry O'Driscoll and others have just thought, well, it's a nonsense. Suspected concussion, you're off. That has to be the rule, because this HIA thing, is a bit too arbitrary and just a moment in time. Anyway, we'll come back to that. I suspect this will become a big talking point, and deservedly so. But Farrell and the Irish camp, I think, deserve another 24 hours to maybe answer questions which will probably be asked overnight by the journalists down there. In the meantime, Richie, he was naturally talking about the performance as well.
Yeah, regardless of the results, Farrell insists the benefits of today's game ahead of next year's World Cup are incalculable.
I said it during the week. This game is huge to us, and the next Maori game they're just as important as the Test matches, because it's well documented that there's been seldom chances of playing international rugby, especially away abroad on tour over the last 3 years, and you try and find ways of giving people a chance, because before the World Cup there isn't that much time. Time is running out as far as that's concerned, so we've got to find out about people and give them an opportunity.
Yeah, Andy Farrell there. There were 5 Irish debutants, must be said. The game was over at half-time. The Maoris scored some amazing tries from deep in their own half and went the length of the pitch. Ireland continually kicked to their back three, who looked very dangerous, and Irish discipline was poor, and the Irish line speed was navigated very well by the Maoris. I mean, Irish players shooting up, and still Maoris were getting to the edges and causing all sorts of problems. So it was certainly a very comprehensive first half for the Maoris, and then things levelled off a touch in the second half, but the game was dead at that stage. So Liam Toland, Fiona Hayes on the way after 8 o'clock, but suddenly we'll beat the Maoris once and get one win against the All Blacks, so we're now down to one chance against the Maoris, who looked really up for it.
I was saying to you yesterday on the show that a bad performance and result today, you get that feeling on a tour. You mentioned it there at the start of the show. You get that feeling on a tour pretty quickly that there's a negative momentum that builds quickly, and it can happen. Now, in fairness, you're going to have 15 new faces at the weekend, so it shouldn't massively impact, but you do have that fear that this is all not going well, and now we go to Eden Park on Saturday, and suddenly that doesn't go well, and it's going to be a long 2 weeks after that, so it wasn't what we wanted to see this morning. I think we wanted to see Ireland experimental lineup kind of express themselves and feel like that they were, pushing for test places by the end of the tour, and it's not what we got. So you're really just as Andy Farrell might say, that's going to stand to them come the World Cup. I don't know if it's going to stand to them for the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, certainly you would think it's really in their favour that there seems to be a good morale and a real enjoyment to it in Andy Farrell camp, because if there's ever a country and ever a time of year where it can unravel and start to feel dark and miserable, it is New Zealand's summer tour.
In July, having been playing rugby since August, September?
No, it's 13, 14 month for a season for some of these players. There's a text in, as I understand it, a suspected concussion is established by a failed HIA. I'll have to follow up on that point and check that, but even just in taking away medical terms for a second, when you think about it, why do you have a HIA? It's because you've seen an incident which is in effect a suspected concussion. There is a contradictory element in that whole sphere, and I don't know how rugby gets around it, and one of the reasons actually that we haven't had conversations like this too often of late is we've become almost or it's been normalised that we will hear so and so passed their HIA, but we just kept them off anyway. That's become a thing. But one of the glaring questions there is then, so do we need? What's the HIA? Where's the HIA?
Yeah,
where's the standing of the HIA?
That's
again?
it actually, and that's actually a really interesting point that's almost become the standard, because that might be going back to what I said earlier about we feel like we've moved past that in rugby, and that might be more to do with coaching decisions and a more mature organisation around these teams than actually the HIA having improved in any way, shape or form.
That's my sense. It's more cultural than medical.
Yeah.
Richie, we have Wimbledon.
Yeah, one other rugby line actually, Joe, before we move
yeah.
on to Wimbledon. The under-20s are in action at the moment, the Ireland under-20s, of course. In the summer series down in Verona, there are 16 minutes played there, and Ireland trailing the Springboks by 7 points to 0. But as you mentioned there, at Wimbledon, Andy Murray lost the first set of his Wimbledon second round match 6-4 to John Isner. It's 5-5 in the second. Murray will hope to avoid a similar fate to that of Emma Raducanu, the US Open champion, beaten at straights this evening by the former world number 4 Caroline Garcia. The French woman is a potential quarter-final opponent for Ons Jabeur, who's supposed to be in action later, of course light dependent now at this stage, against the Polish qualifier Katarzyna Kawa. Raducanu wasn't the only women's seed to lose today. The second seed, Annette Kontaveit, lost in straight sets to Eula Niemeyer. 2017 champion Garbiñe Muguruza lost her rain-delayed first-round match to Hreet Menon, also in straight sets. But there were wins today for last year's beaten finalist Karolina Pliskova, 8th seed Jessica Pegula, and the former French Open champion Yelena Ostapenko. Men's third seed Casper Ruud is out, though, beaten in 4 sets by Ugo Humbert. No such worries for top seed Novak Djokovic, who sailed into round 3 with a straight sets win today over Tanasi Kokkinakis. While Harmony Tan has upset her doubles partner Tamara Korpach after pulling out of their opening match at Wimbledon with a tie problem. The French woman won an epic singles encounter against Serena Williams on centre court last night, but Korpach has written on Instagram saying, if you're broken after a 3-hour match the day before, you can't play professional. While she won't be drawn on a potential return to Wimbledon, Williams said after last night's match and defeat to Tan that she still has plans to play on, at least in the immediate term.
It definitely makes me want to hit the practice courts because, when you're playing not bad and you're so close and, just like I said, any other opponent probably would have suited my game better. So, yeah, I feel like that it definitely it's actually kind of like, okay, Serena, you could do this if you want.
Any part of you want to play the Grand Slam of your home country this September?
Yeah, I mean, it's, when you're at home and especially in New York and the US Open and that being the first place I've won a Grand Slam is something that's always super special. Your first time is always special. So there's definitely, lots of motivation to get better and to play, at home.
Luke Jensen with us very shortly, text in saying, once again, the skill set of the New Zealanders, really the decisive factor, not least considering the weather, says Tony. I know, it was like that ball was dry, the way they were flinging it around. It was really impressive, their joy to watch.
Sometimes when we watch Six Nations or maybe like Heineken Cup games or whatever, we kind of talk about the improvement of Irish rugby players in that way. And I'm not saying there isn't an improvement, but then I think sometimes when we go down to the Southern Hemisphere, we realise how far we still have to come.
Yeah, reality check.
That, oh great, we're offloading it, amazing. We weren't doing that 5 years ago. It's like, but we don't know the half of it yet.
I agree. I think they would look at Tyke Furlong and be like, oh yeah, he can play a bit.
I'm not I'm not diminishing Irish players' world classness in terms of their effectiveness.
Oh yeah.
I just think that some of those individual, that Tyke Furlong pass that we all drooled over in the Six Nations, I feel like most New Zealand props could probably do that.
Yeah. I mean, most props in the world couldn't, but
Well, maybe that's unfair, actually. Yeah.
Maybe it's
actually, you know what? I'm taking back that.
Yeah,
Tyke Furlong is the only one who could do that, including most backs.
I think even they would be like, okay, he's got game. I'm just looking here on the World Rugby homepage here on the situation. So they're going through the various protocol because somebody texted in to say that a suspected concussion is only established by a HIA. And so I thought, well, okay, that's kind of interesting. So if you look on the World Rugby page, what it says is, and this is what applies, I think, to the Lockman situation. Here's the World Rugby page. Players displaying obvious on-pitch signs of concussion are immediately and permanently removed from play, and the completion of the off-field screening tool is not required. So in effect, if somebody on the pitch is displaying signs of concussion, you don't need the HIA. It doesn't even go to HIA.
Okay, so HIA is supposed to be there for a bang to the head that looks possibly innocuous but needs to be looked at.
I think that's
maybe I'm being too simple there, but
Well, they're saying if you display on-pitch signs of concussion, you're immediately and permanently removed. This is the World Rugby page, and you don't even do the HIA. You're assessed after the game or whenever.
Well, you can't say the right decision was made this morning then.
It's very hard to look. Neither Dr. McCormack, Dr. Molloy, or Dr. McCarthy, can weigh in fully here. But yeah, I'd look at that. I don't know how you could look at that. I mean, I know you didn't catch the game this morning, but Rich, I don't know how you could look at that and say there isn't some on-sign pitch there from Cushion. I mean, again, we are journalists as opposed to doctors, but I think if we saw any player at any level behaving that way after a bang to the head, we would consider that an on-pitch sign of concussion.
Firstly, I'm delighted you addressed me by my proper title. But also, like the contact alone would give you cause for concern. The fact that Jeremy Loughman couldn't get up immediately and was unsure on his feet and facially looked dazed, that's enough to say, come on, off you go. There's no chance of us taking any chances here on a potential head injury, because what I've seen here is enough.
Yeah. You're kind of more paleontologist akin to Ross Geller. I feel like I'm George Clooney in Eeyore.
An actor.
Yeah. So we have a couple of moments left to get through last few stories. Séamus McEnaney.
Yeah, gone. He says managing Monaghan's footballers has been one of the greatest privileges of his life. He's ended his second spell in charge of the Farney men after 3 years. McEnaney guided Monaghan to last year's Ulster final, but they lost to Mayo this year in the first round of the qualifiers. Romelu Lukaku, meanwhile, in the past few minutes, has completed his loan move from Chelsea to Inter. €8 million is how much Chelsea are going to receive in terms of a loan fee from Inter. Inter, of course, received €115 million for the Belgian services just this time last year. Well, a bit of movement as well, and an interesting one in the first division here at home. Cork City have signed striker Louis Britton. The 21-year-old spent the first half of this season on loan from Bristol City at Waterford, where he was the joint second top scorer in the first division, scoring 10 goals. But he's now transferring his services west, over to Turner's Cross, and is going to help them get promoted back to the Premier Division.
Okay. Luke Jensen has delayed 5 minutes, Richie, so we have 5 minutes to spare suddenly.
Really,
GACCCC.
Yeah, it looks like they're going to meet again tomorrow. The Central Competitions Control Committee going to meet before deciding upon any punishments arising from the Galway Armagh All-Ireland quarter-final. They met yesterday to go through referee David Coldrick's match report. They have written to the Meath officials seeking clarification around the red card shown specifically to Galway captain Sean Kelly and his Armagh counterpart Aidan Nugent. Galway already making shapes to appeal Kelly's red card and get him cleared to play in their All-Ireland semi-final.
David Coldrick writing his match report, do you think he was thinking to himself, what's the point of this? Life's too short.
The time that I have to spend doing this, and it's utterly pointless.
It's like a 5,000 word mini thesis.
I don't know. I feel like this story isn't going away anytime soon.
Well, thankfully, just by dint of the semi-final fast approaching, it has to go away quite soon, doesn't it? In
terms of, yeah. I just think it could be we've a long off-season coming up. And sorting out it feels like this actually happened with the hurling a couple of weeks ago, and the appeals. I feel like it was an appeal too far for a lot of people, and it's like while this has been going on, so while this has been something that Clare and Galway were the ones who actually, Fatty was the one who was the most egregiously got off, to be honest, on the technicality. But look, Clare and Galway, and I feel like it almost reached critical mass of people like have gone from eye rolling to saying, and almost laughing about it, to saying, do you know what, this actually has to change. And then there's a huge brawl in the football the week after, and it feels like we've just kind of got to the point where they're going to have to do something about this, and by next season actually have some new rules in place in the way we were talking about last night, so I do actually feel like this isn't going to go away. I feel like we could be talking about this come autumn.
Yeah, we should also keep it all in perspective though, because Eddie Brennan and James O'Connor are on the way after 9, and looking into some of the Clare Kilkenny tussles. Then like there's an 0-5 league match, which frankly so some of the tales from that, which I'm sure we'll get into, by comparison with the 99% handbags plus one definitely unacceptable incident from the weekend. But like the game in the last 15 years has got a lot cleaner.
Oh, it's massively sanitised, yeah. Like that, the league match, I don't specifically remember. I've heard tales of it, but even them meeting in 04, like the replay, the Battle of Thurles, is what Eddie referred to it as earlier when I was talking to him about coming on tonight, And there's a whole incident with Henry Shevin. It was mad. Like they were just like killing each other for the whole game. And those days are gone.
Yeah,
that was the closest we'll get to that now, is the Munster final, where there might have been a couple of digs and a couple of incidents that the Sunday game were able to pull out afterwards. But in general, most people watching going, yeah, that was a good, hard, fair game.
Yeah.
You know, with maybe a couple of incidents that went a little bit too far. But back then, you know, it was accepted, and it was people are definitely ready to move on from it. But at the same time, I do feel like there's been a slight overreaction to what outside of the eye gouge was just stupidity.
Well, I thought Darragh O'Shea in his Irish Times column was saying the worst thing about Sunday's Melee was the politicians making hay out of it. And there was something in Micheál Martin and Catherine Martin rocking up that made everyone think, we don't need this now.
That was too much.
Like the 5-year-old who's come home traumatised by it.
Let's go behind the curtain. Like I did. We were in the office after the show on Monday, and I literally just sighed to you and just said, Catherine Martin's after really annoyed me. And that is just true. I was just annoyed by the fact that on the plinth, though they were asked, both the Taoiseach and the Minister for Sport were talking about this brawl like as if it was an international incident. You know, I don't think it was a matter of state.
No. Like 5-year-olds like wrestling. I think he was all right with it. You know what I mean? A bit of handbag's fine.
Yeah,
so.
that's for me.
There we go. Or she, excuse me, should say, that 5-year-old. So anyway, that's the CC situation. Richie, just one last story before we do wrap up. We touched on the PK Lewis Hamilton controversy. We've heard from PK.
Yeah, Ireland pulled a penalty back in that under-20s game against the Springboks. But as you mentioned there, Nelson Piquet has apologised wholeheartedly for using a racist word while talking about Lewis Hamilton. The 3-time Formula 1 world champion says he used a colonial term used in Brazilian Portuguese and insists he had no intention to cause offence. He believes the translation being reported in English is not correct. Hamilton called its usage archaic. Not really much of an apology, to be honest.
No, and I suspected this would be the defence, but I think what was very clear is that Nelson Piquet, if he's being honest, and the way he used the word as opposed to just saying Hamilton's name, it was clearly disparaging, derogatory, and he would have known it was along lines of race. You put those three things together, it's very hard to take him seriously here. And it also seems he's a track record of saying
loose-tongued
great things,
nonsense. Yeah.
Like he called Nigel Mansell's wife ugly, this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I think he accused Ayrton Senna of being gay, or said it in a derogatory way, you know. But like,
he's driving Bolsonaro around.
Driving Bolsonaro.
Oh, there we go.
My God. Like, I would encourage people, if they haven't heard it, to listen to our piece with Jess McFadden yesterday, because his point there, and that's going to be his defence, is going to be, this was translated into English in a sensationalist way, and it's making me out to be something I'm not. And actually, we talked about it yesterday. We went through exactly what, you know, that this is going to be translated in a kind of a slightly inaccurate way, but even so. And I think that's worth listening to that piece to kind of get a sense of that a non-apology apology like that, despite him saying the word wholeheartedly, you know, isn't really good enough, to be honest.
Yeah. And, you know, he didn't write the apology either. You know, you just, that's how these things work. We are out of time. Richie, thanks very much.
Dr. Richie Joe, please.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Nice.
And Michael McCarthy, thanks very much.
Cheers.